What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the highlights for the Steam Winter Sale, which kicked off yesterday and runs through January 4th of 2024. As the year is coming to a close, we have great deals on a ton of different games, so as always I like to cover what particularly stood out to me during these sales, though I will be focusing mostly on new releases, as this year has been absolutely packed with amazing games, and you can already get some of them for quite cheap. That said, a couple things here at the beginning. I'm going to be talking in US dollars mostly because that's the currency I use, so while these will of course vary by region, I cannot possibly collate all that information, not to mention the thousands of other games that are going to be on sale that I won't mention at all here. So if you happen to have seen a great deal on perhaps an older game or a game I just didn't cover, by all means drop it down in the comment section below. But with that said, let's go ahead and get on with it. I want to kick this off with Baldur's Gate 3 because it is getting a modest discount of 10%, which I only really mentioned because I was surprised it got a discount at all. That brings it down to $53 US, but given its massive success and that it's still kind of rolling in that success, I was a little surprised that this got a discount at all. I don't think they needed to in any way, though it is a nice little PR move, I suppose. Next up, we have Octopath Traveler 2 with a 30% discount. That puts it at $40, my second favorite game of the year. This is a JRPG, of course, following up the original Octopath Traveler, while at the same time expanding on many of its systems to make an overall very robust title. I enjoyed it quite a bit, though it was a little on the expensive side for most people given the nature of it, and I do think $40 is quite a bit more reasonable, I would say, so definitely wanted to call that one out. Third up, we have another big hit from this year, which is Cyberpunk 2077, or more specifically its DLC. Though the base game itself is 50% off right now, which brings it down to $30. You can also pick up the very popular Phantom Liberty DLC for 15% off, which brings it down to $25. So if you've already got the base game, as it's been out for quite some time, and been through numerous sales, I might add, you can also get the DLC for a little bit cheaper and give yourself a ton of content for that price. I doubt I need to tell people much about this game, but I did really enjoy its revamp and its DLC update as well. Moving on to, in my opinion, the best Souls-like title this year, we have Lies of P, which you can grab for 20% off, bringing it down to $47. And if you like Souls-likes at all, I think this is a great one, especially for a reduced price, mind you. But even at full price, this one was a lot of fun, and one of few Souls-likes I've played that you could easily think it was actually from Software, so it certainly had a lot going for it. On a slightly different note, in the TRPG space, you can pick up Jagged Alliance 3 for 35% off, bringing it down to $30. And if you want a game that blends the more strategical elements of something like XCOM with more traditional CRPGs, then I think Jagged Alliance 3 is a great option for you. It has a ton of roleplay potential and is inspired by 80s action movies, so everything is very over the top, and it was definitely one of the better TRPGs that released. But if you're looking for another action-packed game, maybe Remnant 2 might be for you. With a 40% discount, that brings the base game down to $30. You can make your way across a few different worlds and universes, if you will, as you make a build and take down all sorts of enemies, fighting the corruption of the Root. Remnant 2 is great. It's got a lot of fun multiplayer options, a ton of secrets to explore in a slightly roguelite fashion that a lot of people will describe as Dark Souls with guns, though realistically I think it's a little bit more of just a regular action adventure, mixed with some Diablo-esque elements, if anything. In any event, however, it is a ton of fun. Though, speaking of Diablo, we then have Diablo 4, because this game recently came to Steam, and with a 40% off discount for the base game, bringing it down to $40, I think you can have a ton of fun for that price. And while I personally do have my gripes about the game's monetization methods and ongoing direction, paying effectively $40 for potentially hundreds of hours of content and continuing seasons that can bring you even more content, which you don't actually have to pay for, does make for a pretty great holiday deal. And given that they fixed a lot of the problems brought on with Season 1 by Season 2, which changed a lot of things, they're even addressing in-game stuff now, I think it easily justifies $40. Another big Souls-like that released this year, though, was Lords of the Fallen, which is on a 35% discount, bringing it down to $38, which again I think is a great price for a title like that. And given that this title has, in fact, addressed and updated many of the things people had gripes with when the game launched, bringing it to a really good place that they are continuing to update. So while the game is definitely a little janky here and there, I do think overall it is a great experience, and with a sizable discount, it's a lot easier to overlook some of that stuff. That does bring us to Starfield, which is on a 30% discount, bringing it down to $48. And while this game is certainly polarizing, if you haven't tried it for yourself yet and you're curious about how it plays, I do think a 30% discount is pretty sizable for a game that hasn't been out that terribly long. So if you want to see what it's all about for yourself, this is a great opportunity to do so at a reduced cost. Now, another game you could potentially spend hundreds of hours in is Wartales, another TRPG that released earlier in the year. This one, seeing you in control of a mercenary party, is at a 25% off discount, bringing the total price down to just $26. This game focuses more on emergent storytelling rather than a big focused narrative. You'll make your way through certain counties which each have their own sort of self-contained story, but while you do that, you'll be engaging with all sorts of systems that encourage you to make money and deal with the needs of your mercenary company, which can evolve and go in all sorts of different directions, leading to a story that will probably be very uniquely personal for you. So if any of that sounds interesting, $26 is a pretty amazing deal for that game, which wasn't all that expensive in the first place, so easily justifiable. Now, a slightly more focused TRPG experience, though, is Showgunners, a smaller Running Man style game that focuses very heavily on its turn-based combat alongside exploration phases that see you solving problems on a game show that might kill you. Showgunners is at a 45% discount, bringing it all the way down to $16. And while it's not a terribly long game, $16 is a steal for that. It was a very polished experience. And if you're looking for something truly cheap, that might be the way to go. Not far off from that, however, we have the System Shock remake, which launched earlier this year, a remake of one of the classic immersive sim-style games that now, thanks to this remake, there really hasn't been a better time to jump into. So if you want to see what made the original great and so important to the history of that genre, this is a great way to do it for a cheap price. But then we have Colony Ship, a small CRPG that released earlier this year. After a significant period of early access, mind you, you can find this one 25% off, bringing it down to $30. And while I like this one a great deal, as the setup for the game sees you on a generational ship headed to a different planet that takes hundreds of years to get there, leading to all sorts of interesting social situations on the ship itself, it is nonetheless a bit more unforgiving on certain difficulty modes, so if anything, you might want to do some research into this one before you buy it, but if you can get past that, it is a great experience. Now, in a bit of a different vein, we have Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew, a stealth strategy title that puts us in control of a crew of ghost pirates who are going to stealth their way through an inquisition to naturally get after some lost treasure. A really great game that nails exactly what it's trying to do. This one, being 20% off, brings it down to $31. That said, probably worth a mention that the studio behind this one is closing down, Me Games, and while Shadow Gambit is in a great place, they've actually released some DLC for it even, so don't be concerned about things like post-purchase support, I guess, in terms of bugs. I wouldn't be surprised to see this on deeper sales later, but however you feel about that, it is a great game, and $30 is easily justifiable. Though speaking of great smaller games, we have Sea of Stars, a popular JRPG that released earlier this year, or an homage to classic JRPGs might be a better way to put it. This game has gorgeous pixel art, a surprising amount of platforming involved in navigating those beautiful pixel art maps, and a lot of fun stuff to get up to. Not a terribly large game, which means its 20% off discount brings it down to $27, but if you're interested in playing the indie game of the year, this would be that one. So definitely worth your time. Though in somewhat of the opposite case of that, we have a much larger open world title with Hogwarts Legacy. One of the first big releases from this year, it was received quite well, as the game itself does a lot of things very well, especially if you like that IP at all. Now, I do think it stumbles in a few places as an RPG, but I do think it succeeds at what it's trying to do, which makes the fact that it is 50% off, putting it all the way down to $30, a great chance to check it out for yourself if you haven't already, but you've been curious, as I'm a little bit surprised at how deep a sale they gave this one, given that it has sold very, very well over the course of the year. But then we have the biggest individual discount of this particular list with 60% off for Miasma Chronicles, bringing it all the way down to $20. This is from the makers of Mutant Year Zero, a rather unique set of TRPGs, with Miasma Chronicles being quite the step up from Mutant Year Zero. A lot of new mechanics, refining of certain tactics, not to mention a very wide range of difficulty options to help you choose from. For $20, it is quite cheap right now. Though another game in the TRPG space is the recently released Lamplighters League, which, while not as positively reviewed, is 30% off right now for a total of $35, which is preferably where I would have seen it at full price, because the game had a fair few issues on its initial launch, and it doesn't do anything to really move the genre forward. But nonetheless, the sort of occult noir setting is really cool, and I did think its launch price, or base price if you will, of $50 was a little bit high for what it was. So if you want to pick that game up and try it for something a little more reasonable, I think $35 might be worth taking a look at it, which is why I wanted to mention it here. Last, though certainly not least, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor at a 50% off discount, bringing it down to $35. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that the PC release of this game, which would naturally be in line with the Steam Winter Sale, can be a little bit buggy. Most of those issues that it had on launch, which was almost downright broken, have been resolved over on the PC version, though it can still run into issues for you. So if you're going to check this one out, definitely do like a quick look and research on your hardware versus what is working for people, because as long as the game is going to run for you, it's a great title. It is a lot of fun. I think it advances pretty much everything its predecessor, Fallen Order, did, and I had a blast with it when I wasn't running into technical problems. So at 50% off, bringing it down to just $35, I think that's a great price for an otherwise great game, which feels like the exact right place to leave off this list. So with that in mind, I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other deals or anything you'd like to mention, don't forget to leave those down in the comment section below so everybody else can learn about them. With a year of great game releases, we now have a ton of great prices for those game releases. So if you've been holding off, you're likely to not get a much better deal than this for quite some time. With all of that said, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.